So back on the Eurofighter, I'm working on the rudder, the servo that mounts on there, and this is a little bit tricky. So the kit comes with this adapter here, and what I've done is obviously I've modified it because I want to use a full size servo, and the problem really is that when the servo sits in here, if it's a full-size servo, it will wind up hitting this section because of this curve. So I just opened it up a little bit so that I can let the servo sit. Once the servo is positioned in there, then I added or drilled these holes for where the screws are going to go. So the tricky part with this is trying to figure out how this should be mounted. There's no instructions on how to do this, so I'm just doing this as I go. What happens is that I can now line these two up, and you can see it's pretty close right there. And I'm starting to feel happy with the fit. So I trimmed off a subset, some part of the fuselage, so you can see right here's trimmed, same as the other side is also trimmed, and I also rounded the edges off on this mount plate. And I think I do like what I'm seeing here, and here's a reason why. You can see from this angle, let's move this just a little bit, turn the rudder here. You can see that this dog bone piece right here is gone all the way to the bottom. I need this piece to be removable, I think, because that servo, the way that servo sits in there, the curvature comes up like that. So even if I were to pull off the rudder, I'm not sure that I'd be able to remove the servo if I needed to replace it, which means that this whole piece needs to be removable somehow. So while trying to figure out how to make this thing removable, I found out that the positioning of this mount right up in here, the way I had envisioned it, sort of like that, the back plate here wants to actually sit on, let's see if we can move this, wants actually to sit on this tail piece. And I think the intention of this was to have it mounted so that this servo adapter gets glued onto that back plate like that, because this way obviously you can see that servicing the servo becomes a non-issue because you have access to it right there. I'm gonna like glue this in there temporarily like that, and then put that in the fuselage. And if that actually turns out to be the correct thing, then I'm comfortable just epoxying around the edges right here and on that side, and then installing this whole piece as a unit. I think I've finally figured out the rudder placement. So it looks like my rudder is moving really well and everything is in place. Okay, so finally figured out where that mount is gonna go, and this is what I came up with. So that's the angle you can see there, and I've tested that. That's the perfect angle at which the dog bone for the rudder will actually mate to this adapter here. And you can see it was just a lot of trial and error. I had overdone some of this, and that's fine. But basically what wound up happening is I knew that this piece fit very flush to the fuselage there, and so in order to make it removable, I figured that I had to have this piece actually glued onto this rear end of the fuselage. And then in terms of getting this onto the jet, I'll show you how I do it right here, very delicately. But basically, we start with the top and get that top end in. I did grind this down a little bit just so that it fits within this space right here. And so we grind that down and we start by inserting the top there. And then the issue is that you have these two bits here to contend with. So what I've done is I insert this, and then I get one of the sides in, this right here, And then for the other, I just gently maneuver. This is a bit flexible, so just gently maneuver it and pull it out, and it goes right in. And if you look at the top here, there is our adapter for the rudder, and the dog bones right here seems to fit. So there's your dog bone, and that seems to fit just nice. So you can see that couples really well. That dog bone sits all the way to the base of the coupler there. So that's what I want. That's the good coupling that I want for the rudder in that case. So the other thing I want to show here is, now that's done, you can see that taking the rudder and the vertical stab out is pretty effortless. It just pulls out, goes back in, pulls out, and goes back in. It basically sets really nicely on its own, and this is what I've been looking for. So the next phase is obviously, now that we've figured out the mount, is to epoxy it in place. And what I'd like to use for this is either the Infinity Bond EP420 WH non-sag, or the Henkel Loctite E20NS. And always, as with all epoxies, when I'm using, I will squirt the first batch into the garbage because it's not properly mixed. It's unfortunate waste, but I want to make sure that I've ran enough epoxy through the tube for it to mix properly, and usually the first batch that goes out the nozzle isn't properly mixed. So once that's done, I'm just gonna go around and apply our epoxy. So since we do not want this mount to ever come undone, so I'm just gonna do that. Okay, so I'm not sure I'll be able to get any epoxy on the inside, but I'll try. And so far, so good. So we'll let that cure, and then we'll be done with our rudder mount, rudder servo mount here. Very painful work, I think, just getting that alignment. It'd be nice if T1 gave you like a template, or just designed this piece or put guide marks as to where that should go, but they don't. So this winds up being a very trial and error kind of situation, where you're just trying the fit until you get what you want it to be, and then you glue everything together. So we're in the final stages of assembling the rudder servo, and here you can see what the final setup looks like. So we were able to glue that mount, and this is what came out exactly. I also want to bring up this in the back here. You can see that there's some epoxy here, and what that does is here you can see that piece of wood right here that goes all the way to the bottom skin, and that's just a support for the servo from the back. I just didn't like that all the support was basically on this plate, and you can see that T1 gives you these fiberglass pieces that basically reinforce this onto that, but I just added one more in the back, going all the way from the top down to the skin itself here, and that feels like a more rigid servo mount. So the other thing I want to mention here is that the kit comes with this adapter, and this adapter basically kind of has the servo teeth on the bottom side right here, and I believe this is 25 teeth. So you want a servo with a spline that's 25T, or this is not going to fit. And then obviously the next thing is just a little bit of blue Loctite, not too much. I apply just a very small amount of blue Loctite on there to keep the servo spline in the servo coupler in place. So, and that's an M3 screw that goes right in the middle there. The other thing I did here is actually cut down the servo length, the servo wire length, and there's a reason for this. So what I like to do when I'm building parts like this is think about how one will replace stuff if it needs to be replaced. So in this case, if I'd use just the long servo wire, that means that you can imagine the pipe's going to sit right here, and then your vertical stab sits here on the airplane. And so if you make this too long, then you're going to have the connection somewhere like in the jet, and it's going to be a real pain in the butt to get to. What I want to do is make sure that those connections kind of sit down here. You can see the afterburner connections as well. I want them to sit in here so that if I need to replace this, I pull this out, I can pull this wire out, replace the servo, mess with whatever I need to mess with without touching the rest of the plane. So that's another thing to just keep in mind. So here's the final setup for the rudder servo. All 4 screws are in place. You can see those there. And the angle is perfect and it fits just right. So this is what you are gonna aim for. At least this is what I did aim for. So for mounting the end of the fuselage to the rest of the fuselage, what I've done here is taped the top, and basically I aligned the fuselage halves or bits as best as possible, so you can see there the contours that sort of the end piece meets up with the fuselage right there. So I just tried to match those to the best of my ability, make sure that I get a good gap all around, even, and obviously make sure that you know, that piece gets under these protrusions right here. To secure these are the RTL fasteners number 3x5/8, and the reason I like those is because they have a hex pattern on the back. And so for this, because this is at an angle, I find that I need something with a ball end and fairly long stem, so that way I can tighten this from any angle just like that. So this securing is done. You can see the screws there. The alignment is not the best. There's a bit of a lip on either side, so if you look at there, there's a small lip. There's a small lip here as well, and also on the bottom side. So if I can show that, you can see that there's a lip there as well. So it feels like this doesn't quite fit as well, but it's not a big deal. But so far that's installed. I'm gonna just test fit the vertical stab to make sure again that everything fits, and then we're gonna go from there. So here's the final fit. You can hear the servo's engaged, and I think I'm happy with that. So it looks pretty good. What's left is to get the pipe in there, obviously, and get all the wiring to the front for the afterburner and the servo. The other thing I'd like to mention is, so previously this rudder was a little too tall, so it was rubbing on this tailpiece, so I had to send the rudder down a little bit. Here's my wiring for the rudder, and you can see I've used labels to make sure everything is clearly demarcated. So we have the afterburner right, afterburner left, and obviously the rudder. And so those labels go on both ends of the cable, so that I can know. So you can see like this end, the rudder, so I can know which cable goes where. And my idea here is to squish all of these connections in here, sort of like that, so that reaching in to disconnect and or replace stuff is actually going to be easy. What the wiring is going to look like, and you can see I have encased that in fiberglass heat resistant sleeving and just tethered that to the bottom, and all the connections, as I had mentioned before, are going to be in this section. That way, if I pull out the servo, I can get to all the connections that I need to and I also left a little bit of length in there so that that can be pulled up and I can access those connections that way. So moving on. Before we finally attach the back end for probably the last time, we have to insert the pipe, and the pipe goes in from the back. I am going to be using the Hype pipe, so when you order this jet you get the chance to pick Hype pipe, which is apparently a better pipe, and it does show. So this is the Hype pipe. It feels very good quality and solid, so that's what I'm going to be using as opposed to the pipe that comes with the jet, the T1 pipe. So I found the piece that I was missing. So your kit comes with this former right here that's supposed to be screwed onto the fuselage, and that explains all the other holes. Remember when we mounted, we had holes, 3 holes, 1, 2, and on the bottom, but there are also these other holes, and those are for mounting this. Now the beauty of this here is that this piece of wood seems like can only be mounted one way. So that's obviously the wrong way to do it, because you can see the holes don't line up. But if I flip this around and just gently get it to fit in there, then you can see that now these top screws here meet up with the holes on there, and the bottom here meets up with the holes on there. So we're going to secure the mount there using these RTL fasteners number 3x5/8 screws, and those should work really well. The kit also comes with wood screws that you can use. I just like these because they work really well with my driver. So I'm gonna go secure that one right there. Cool. So now we have the mount set up, and then we have our access holes. So I think I'm going to use those to get the wiring through to the bottom. Here's what we're looking like, and it looks as if that white sleeving is pinched, but it isn't. There's enough room in there to secure that, even with the gap completely sealed up here. So we're gonna push the pipe back a little bit, and that's gonna allow us to get access to our screws, and we're gonna secure this in place, and then we're gonna mount the rudder, and that's gonna be done for now. Obviously we'll have to play with the placement of the pipe and figure out where that goes later, but this is sort of where we're at. We're looking good so far. So the rudder's been test fit, and all I did here was add a connector. Right here you can see that. So that connector is for the light. So this light right here, as well as the formation light, which I just added. So those connect up in here, and then it's just a removable connector, and then I also hollowed out the front so that this connector will sit in there correctly, and that sits just perfectly in there, and my wires come out through the front right here. So to secure the rudder you need a 3mm wrench, and there's 3 screws. So there's 2 in here to secure the clamp down, and there's one that goes in the front right through here. So we're gonna secure these 2 down. I'm gonna make sure everything is fitted perfectly correctly. I'll tighten that one, and then tighten the second one right here. Felt for it. Okay, so you're not done. There is a 3rd screw that goes in the front. Let's get this out. So right there you can see the final hole, which is in here, which takes a 4x12mm bolt, and that comes in your kit. So we're gonna take that out. I just added a washer to it, and we're gonna secure that in there. So I'm actually gonna try and use a longer. So this is a 4mm by 16, because the 4x12 didn't seem to actually catch the threads on the back end. So let's see if this will do it. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So the only change I made was 4x16mm screw in the front. The manual calls for 4x12, but I couldn't get it to catch the threads, which are on the rudder piece. So 4x16, a little bit longer 4mm screw, that catches it. And now everything is installed and good to go.